My name is Katy Lynch. I am the CEO of Techweek, and thank you so much for coming to this private screening of Code. I hope you all enjoyed it. Very powerful film that touched upon a very important topic, right? That means a lot to me personally, being a woman in tech, but should really be important to all of us, right? So I'm sitting here with Colleen Lewis, Jane Margolis, and Abby Kearns. And if you ladies would love to give a more formal introduction of who you are and your background, that would be wonderful. All right, Abby, kick things off.
Hi, I'm Abby Kearns, and I work for Pivotal, one of the sponsors of the film. I am part of the product management team working on our Pivotal Cloud Foundry platform.
And I'm Jane Margolis. I'm a researcher at UCLA, but I've been studying the issue of the gender gap and the race gap in computer science since 1994. So I studied it at Carnegie Mellon University first, and then I've been looking at the whole issue in the LA public schools. I don't know if it's working.
Hi, I'm Colleen Lewis. I'm a computer science professor at Harvey Med College, where we've got about 40% women in our intro CS, or in all of our CS courses in our major.
Cool. All right. So I'm a very inquisitive entrepreneur, and I have a lot of questions about the film. But this isn't about me. It's actually about you guys. So I'd love to turn the questions over to you.
We're not the only people who are trying to make progress on this. The National Center for Women in Information Technology is looking to expand access to computer science both at the K-12 and college level. So they have a number of initiatives where they're partnering with colleges and universities who are trying to increase the percentage of women and underrepresented minorities at their institutions. And additionally, the Anita Borg Institute that runs Grace Hopper, which you saw some pictures of there, has an initiative called BRAID, where we're trying to take specifically hosted by Harvey Mudd, 12 other institutions and try and coach them through some of the changes that we've made at Mudd. So that includes revising the intro course and providing women access to role models in the field. I think others can speak to what progress we've seen. I think the progress that we've seen is frustratingly slow, but understandably so. I think it's problematic if we think, oh, and then tomorrow everything will be fixed. I think this is going to take concerted effort and everyone really coming together on it. It's not just something faculty can do. It's not just something K-12 teachers can do.
Well, a lot of what the research shows, if I look at college and education environments, and that's different than the work environment. But in terms of college and education, there's many different issues. One is the image of what it means to be in technology, and often people don't understand what it is unless they sort of grown up around it, and they think that all it involves is just sitting behind a computer and hacking for hacking's sake, and it's not connected to any larger social purpose. And that really in research shows to be very discouraging to a lot of women, students who want more to be connected to some other more of a social purpose, not just hacking for hacking's sake. So there's the image, there's the culture where people feel like if you're not coding 24/7, and that's your only thing that you do in your life, then you really don't belong. And then there's the whole notion of who has the smarts, and in this society, unfortunately, women from very young have been sort of brought up that they're not the ones that are smart in this realm of life. And then there's the whole culture in which women feel that they're just, they just have to prove so much that they belong. If they don't get straight A's, and even then, they don't know if they belong. So there's a whole mix, a nauseous stew, that kind of discourages women in education. In terms of the workplace, there's, again, sort of and I don't know if you all think that this is an issue, but It was cited there, the programmer culture, the sort of sexism that just is often witnessed at tech fairs and everything, the sort of signals that women don't belong. And then there's the pace, the work of 24/7, and does the work-family balance help create some of the dropouts from the workforce? I'd be curious to know what you all think. I think another issue to put into this, it's not just gender. I think the race gap in technology is really, really, really bad. And that's a whole other set of issues.
So you'd say almost that it's cultural, but it's also the narrative we're telling ourselves in the workplace and throughout the education. And I think that's also one of the challenges.
Mm-hmm. We're running a program that's actually now nationwide called Exploring Computer Science, and it's a high school course. And what our research showed in the LA public schools, which was done in around 2000 to 2004, but not much has changed. In the schools with the high numbers of African American and Latino kids in low resourced areas, what was called computer science was really typing and word processing and internet searching. That is what it was. And so there was this huge gap between what was going on in those schools and the schools that were in the white, wealthy part of Los Angeles on cliffs overlooking the ocean. You may know what I'm talking about, where there was a full range of opportunities, where Hollywood and Disney came in and was doing workshops, for the kids. So in terms of curriculum, there was a huge gap, and then there was a shortage of teachers. So what we've done is we've designed this program. We've brought it into those schools that I was talking about with the high numbers of African American and Latino kids. And we have recruiting teachers. We have a very intensive program with teachers that is both looking at the content of computer science, but also the belief systems, and trying to put forth other role models and getting kids engaged in how computer science can be relevant for the interests that they're interested in their community. So it's gone nationwide. It's in Chicago, New York, LA, San Francisco, has to go middle school, has to go lower, but we're having to challenge principals' beliefs, teachers' beliefs. Kids themselves have internalized because who are the role models that they see who belong in computer science? It's Steve Jobs, it's Bill Gates, et cetera, et cetera. So they rarely see role models of people that look like them. And so it's a multi-pronged approach in trying to, it's really desegregating a field.
I think honestly, to be candid, it's continuing to speak up, right? I think that too often we're quiet about this issue, right? There's many times where, and I've heard many stories, many of them are my friends, fellow female CEOs, that are in rooms with male investors or whatnot, and there will be a comment made, and the female won't say anything until after they've left the room. And I think it is just so incredibly important to speak up. And we're fortunate that we live in a day and age where we have platforms now that allow us to do that, right? We have social media, but we need to stand our ground more as females.
I couldn't agree more. I think speaking up, but also changing the narrative. Going back to what you were saying, we've told ourselves. Even I'm a woman in tech and I've been in tech 17 years, and I have my own narrative that I've built up. And you're in a culture that has a narrative, and I think to change the narrative, you're going to have to be vocal and really point out, because I think even the well-intentioned don't realize their own biases and their own perspective and their own viewpoints on what the culture should be and how to to change that. And I think really continuing to speak up and point out where we can be more successful together and how we can work better together.
So I agree, speaking up is critical. I also take more of a collective action approach than an individual response. And all I want to say there is I have been very, and you're going to think this has nothing to do with your world or anything, but I've been very inspired by the football teams in the University of Missouri and what's happened there in the last week. And why I bring that up is it's a question of collective action. And I don't know what that leaves you with, but we've often approached this problem as an individual problem, and which there has to be an individual response, but there also has to be a collective action response. Yeah. And that's interesting to figure out what that would be.
Okay, I'll throw in one more. One is like join the collective action. Like, oh, what are we doing? Oh, let's do it. Okay, and the other piece I think is separating out like bias from being this evil bad thing that we can't associate it with, and really being able to own it. Because the thing is people have unconscious, unintentional biases. I wish we didn't, but we've got them. You know, one experience I had was people would tell me, I think out of kindness, Colleen, you won't like computer science. You're a people person. And they were doing that they were doing that out of love. Do you know what I mean? They were trying to direct me and give me great advice. But what they didn't realize is unconsciously that was coming from a place of, ooh, you just don't really fit with what I expect computer science is. So these people that loved me and were giving me this terrible advice, they're not bad people, but they do need to think about the ways in which, even though they had only the best of intentions, it had a very negative effect on me of just telling me that I don't belong, you know, that I shouldn't like this thing that I really like, that I can't be successful in this because of something that's really important to me, which is being a people person. So I think separating out that your intentions as an ally don't matter. What matters is the impact. And your impact is never going to be exactly what you want it to be. And you always have to work day in, day out to try to make your intentions and your impact align. What brings me to the table is that I fell into computer science, right? But I think that, you know, I think maybe this is not quite what you were thinking, but I feel like, you know, I look around me and look at the injustice that exists in the world, and I think that this is the injustice that exists in the world that I'm most qualified to help address. You know, this is the one where I feel like I can help start collective action. And it's maybe not the worst, right? Like hunger, poverty, like human trafficking. There are worse things, but I think it's an important one, but it doesn't make issues of gender, race, and class and access within other STEM fields less important, I think.
Well, I also want to highlight one of the earlier parts in the documentary is like the Goldilocks and really making science and engineering and math not even accessible, but also something that is considered. And I think that opens the gateway, not just into computer science, but in all sciences that involve, you know, any of those things. And I think getting people to think in that process and getting people's mindset that, hey, you know what, this isn't just a male-dominated field or a specific ethnicity field. This is actually open to everyone, and I can, you know, and I have a lot of different options once I'm in that field. I mean, you know, on a slightly unrelated note, I do feel like that in computer science, we focus oftentimes too crisply on pedigree around degree too. And I think a diversity of opinion, a diversity of degrees, and diversity of backgrounds are more of what we need of, as opposed to saying a specific degree in a specific field. And I'd like to see more people from other backgrounds approaching the solution, approaching the problems we're trying to solve and offering different solutions.
computer science has become kind of the field that people associate with driving innovation across all disciplines, from the arts to medicine to oceanography to everything, to fashion design. So computer science is this driver. So it's become, and you know, I think that computer science companies, industry, are putting a lot of money into this. Like when the person sitting next to you was saying, why don't more people know about it? Well, President Obama has been talking about it, and there's a lot of like Congress people that are talking about it, and it's in the paper all the time. And Google and Facebook and everybody is putting tons of money into this. But it also, these questions about diversity in the field of computer science is also being taken up by other STEM disciplines like chemical engineering and all of these others. So I think the reason why it's being about computer science is because there's a lot of publicity about we need more software engineers, and a lot of the industry is putting money into this and making movies. I mean, that was Megan Smith, who's the head of technology in the government and used to work for Google, and Facebook was in there, et cetera, et cetera. So, but it's an issue across all of those fields. You're right. And I think computer science is also very, very creative, and that's what we try to bring to the kids in the schools, that it's super cool and creative. I mean, that woman who designed Brave's red hair, oh my God. I mean, I wish when I was younger I had seen something like that, because that would have touched my art sense and wanting to do something cool like that.
I can certainly speak to, at Harvey Mudd, we've tried to diversify the intro course so that, you know, you don't just see a narrow slice of computer science and just programming. And you also might say, oh, weeks 6 and 7 were the worst. Oh my gosh, I never want to do that type of computer science. So that you can see the breadth of computer science, and that you might like some parts more than others, and that there's a lot to choose from, you know, ranging from electrical engineering to math. In terms of making more accessible toys and resources that engage with coding and aren't really heavily masculinized, I think there's been a lot of great work, right? Like Goldilocks toys. There's also a lot of cute robots on the market at the moment that are not explicitly masculinized, which I think is productive.
Jewelbots.
What's that?
Jewelbots. Jewelbots, the new Kickstarter campaign that are programmable Arduinos for targeting specifically for young girls to help them learn to program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there's more, but yeah, diversification of the pipeline would be hugely helpful.
This is something I do to try and manage my own biases and the ways in which it impacts the people in my life, is you just have to ask people in your environment, like, oh, like, you know, I'm trying to be an ally here. How's that going? You know, are there things that I'm doing where I'm like really just putting my foot in my mouth? You know, and so when I'm working with our affinity groups at Harvey Mudd, or in just my everyday life, questioning myself, oh, I was joking with that student, but did that joke come from a place of racism? And being able to have conversation with my friends about that, to be like, oh, yeah, probably, or no, maybe that time it was okay. Those conversations and those thought processes and engaging, you bringing it up to people rather than them having to say like, oh, dude, you said this thing and that was not so cool.
I think from my perspective, what you often have are people that say, yes, you know what, I want to see more women on my team. I want to see more women in leadership in this group, and I'm all for women. I'm so pro women. Yay, women, right? But then you look around the table, and there's none. Mm-hmm. And you say, I hear the words you're saying, but how do you translate that into action? And I think really helping people figure that out and figure out how to overcome, and they're usually not doing it on purpose. It's going back to the narrative and the story that we tell ourselves and the story that's told in the industry, and it's habitual, and it's very endemic and it's hard to change. And I think one of the things we talk a lot about at Pivotal a lot is change is hard. Change is really, really hard. And I think we're asking not only an industry to change, we're asking all the people in it to change. And I think that's going back to your comment about collective action, how do you mobilize people around specific outcomes? And I think that's probably more where we should be heading.
I think it really depends what type of computer science you do. So like I said in our intro course, where week 6 and 7 might just be like mathy sort of stuff, and you might be like, man, that's the worst. I think when you get down into younger grades, the math that we teach 4th graders is super relevant, right? Like in 4th grade, we teach kids like 3 plus triangle equals 5. What could triangle be? And that's math. And that's the math that we're teaching in 4th grade. And that math is super relevant to reasoning about variables and reasoning about state in computer science and programs. But there's plenty of computer science that isn't explicitly math. Like I worked at Leapfrog making educational video games, and I was super excited when I got to use algebra. I was like, what? I just used algebra to figure out if these two things are colliding. But from my time when I worked in industry, I didn't feel like I was doing a lot of math, but there's certainly some overlap in the thinking process. I always think like telling people to you're awesome, have more confidence, only good things. But when you say you also need to be kind of bulletproof, because sometimes people are going to be maybe potentially unintentionally jerks, and you just need to be tough enough. And if you're not tough enough, then it's your problem because you didn't have enough confidence. And that doesn't feel great when, do you know what I mean? When, like, say I tell somebody about something that happened and they're like, oh, you need to be more confident. And I'm like, well, yeah, that is also like an awesome thing to be. I would love to be more confident. But I think we have to really worry about times where we tell underrepresented minorities that, well, if you're going to want to make it here, you're just going to need to have a much thicker skin. Like, I don't want to have a thicker skin. I just, okay, yeah, I also want to be, really happy and be confident, but I don't want to have a thick skin. There's a lot of activities like that trying to get things started. I think it's really important when we think about these initiatives that we're not just targeting students who would have the opportunity to pay for private lessons, right? That we want much more expansive collective action that reaches many more students. So I think the piano lesson model might not be the best fit, but I think as a community we're pursuing a lot of different methods, and I'm sure that's one of them.
Just about this collective action thing, I think it's sort of brought up in the movie by Maria Clowie, in which the president of Harvey Mudd, in which she was saying, she basically thinks that it's a question of political will, and I know that when I was a researcher at Carnegie Mellon University, it was the dean of computer science at that time who said he wanted a research project about why there were so few women. At that point there was 7%, and this was in 1994. And he was determined that it wasn't just going to be a research report that was going to sit on the shelf, but that change was going to come as a result of it. And 4 years later, it went from 7% to 42%. And so it wasn't just the women changing, it was, or getting more confidence, or being more affirmative, or getting thick skin. It was that the people on top made these huge changes. They were determined, and so they said, our admissions criteria are all skewed towards men. We're looking for kids that come out of high school that know 5 different coding languages and have been the president of their computer science club, as opposed to strong students who are really interested in computer science, who want to learn it in college, who have been leaders. And so we're looking for the wrong criteria, and we have to look at what the students tell us about the introductory courses and how we have to change that, and we need to have an organization of women students to give them support. And there was just all these different ways. They said, we're going to change this. We're going to listen to what the students said, and we're going to change it. So it was a question of political will from the leadership in the top, as opposed to putting the blame on the few women that were there.
Yeah, actually, it's something that came up at another event I was at. We had a long conversation around just that, because I think there are a lot of amazing people that come out of different programs that make a huge difference in the way that we view a problem and we solve a problem. And we aren't going to get it by having the same, even if we have a diverse candidate pool, but they come from the same school and have the same education and the same frame of reference, they're gonna still look at the problem very similarly. Whereas if you have people that have come through different programs, have different backgrounds, you bring a lot of different things to the table. And I think we should encourage a broader range of participation across different studies and different degrees and different programs. And I think having a way to accelerate them, say you majored in art, like Danielle did in the documentary, but then you decided that, you know, computers are really cool. So bringing that artistic narrative to your studies gives you a very different view into what is possible. And I think if we want to really innovate, not only do we need diverse people at the table, we need diverse backgrounds at the table.
Yeah, I think it's really clear it should be middle school. Middle school often is where the big gender divide happens also. So you get these kids in elementary school, girls who just really good in math and really good students, and all of a sudden in middle school, this big cultural divide happens where girls start dropping out of math and science and think they're not a math and science girl or whatever. And so I think it clearly should be in middle school. And there's big initiatives now underway to do that. There's also, I don't know if you've heard about code.org, an hour of code. That happens in December. Like millions of kids around the country are doing this 1 hour of little coding exercises, and teachers are involved in everything. And they're doing that as early as kindergarten. So there's some sort of debate within the educational community about what developmental stages are appropriate for, you know, learning computer science. There's big debates about, you know, I rather have kids playing with manipulatives and blocks and crayons than sitting in front of, you know, the screen. So a lot of those debates are taking place prior to middle school, but I think everyone agrees that it should be in middle school. I love that. Okay, I don't know if people back there could hear his question, but he was saying, you know, singing in choirs, no one thinks of singing as a gendered activity. You know, it's like boys and girls are doing that. Is there something to learn there, you know, from that? And the reason why I love your question is because I actually wrote a book called Stuck in the Shallow End, Education, Race, and Computing that was looking at why computer science was, I'll call it a segregated field, was mostly white and Asian males. And we compared that to swimming, because there was a CDC study that came out that said that African American kids drowned 4 times more than white kids. And that, when we were in the process of studying computer science, that just took us aback. Why were African American kids drowning more? And so it turns out that it goes all the way back, you know, prior to the civil rights movement, when swimming was a big contested activity. Even though it's necessary for life survival, it was big contested, and whites would close down the pools, do anything to have, and that happened here in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, prior to the civil rights movement, people of color, and it wasn't just African Americans, could only swim in the public pools 1 day a week, and that was the night before the pool was going to be drained. And the beaches here, right down in Santa Monica, there's a 200-yard stretch near the pier where only African Americans could swim. And there's huge fights over the beaches and being able to swim. So there's a whole historical legacy around swimming. And that was very informative to us, actually, as we were studying the segregation in computer science. So the reason I liked your question is I like looking at these different activities that are segregated and are not segregated and trying to figure out what is it that makes them that way and what can we do to shake it up. And I mean, we could probably spend all night sitting around talking about singing and choirs and what kind of music is gendered and what kind of isn't. And, you know, I mean, it really would be fascinating. Just if you look at music and all the gendered and racial implications with music. This stuff has historical roots, it has psychological roots, and I think that it's what's being played out in the world of technology, you know, in many different ways.
So I guess I have one quick kind of closing thought. You know, you ladies are really sitting on this panel because, you know, you're all on board with this cause, right? And each of us kind of come from a different place. And so kind of the final question is, you know, why this issue, why you, and what single thought or person or idea, you know, keeps you motivated to stay on course every day?
I think when I get discouraged by how big the problem is, realizing that I can make a difference with individuals, right? So, you know, this year we started a program where we're bringing kids to Harvey Mudd College, predominantly Latinos kids, to learn computer science. And they wouldn't have had that opportunity otherwise. And seeing them excited about it, and seeing that even when the problems of racism and classism and sexism feel so big, it can still feel like I can make a difference.
I guess I'm inspired. I'm a child of the 60s. I grew up in the civil rights movement. I see this as just a continuation of my life passion. And I never would have thought I'd be working since 1994 in the field of technology. I'm, you know, studying it, but I feel really passionate about the growing inequality in our world, and I want to figure this out.
I've been in tech a long time, and I think, particularly in the last couple of years, you know, you get tired of saying, well, you know, someone will fix this, and this problem will fix itself, and we're going to totally get around to that because we've been talking about this for, I don't know, 40 years. Yeah. But finally, you're like, you know, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? And I think, you know, I want to really pave the way for those women that are coming up and really want to make this a space where they can be successful and lay that groundwork and really make sure that this continues to grow as opposed to we just all decide to give up and go home.
Absolutely. It's brilliant. Thank you so much.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting. I'm from the UK originally, and I moved to Chicago 8 years ago and worked for a travel tech startup, and that's really when I got my feet wet, and that's when I got really excited about being a part of the tech scene and tech community. And I spent a lot of time way back in like 2007 when I first moved here, on sites like meetup.com and eventbrite.com, and basically attending as many tech events as possible just to meet all of these interesting you know, founders and entrepreneurs and all these cool people, you know, male and female. And that ended up inspiring me to start my own tech social media company a few years later. And I ran that for 4 years, and then I sold that business last year. And so, you know, after I sold that business and it got acquired, I was like, okay, I'm really, really passionate now about changing people's lives, right, through tech. I want tech to be accessible to everyone. And what better way to do that than become the CEO, you know, of a tech festival that allows me to do that. You know, for those of you that have never been to Techweek before, we're in 6 cities domestically and 1 internationally. And when I see the future of this company next year in 2017 and beyond, I want Tech Week to be everywhere. I want to shine a national spotlight on what is happening everywhere around the world. And tech, again, as I said before, it should be accessible to everyone, whether you're young, you're old, you're female, you're male, doesn't matter your culture, your background, whatever. Tech should be available to everyone. Cool. Thank you so much for being a part of the discussion.